Record? All right. Okay.
So sorry for your loss.
Okay. Saba Refael was involved in public service throughout his whole life. He served as the vice mayor of Bnei Brak, where he lived all his life, and continued to be involved in the local Mafdal party afterwards. However, I want to tell you today about my personal Saba, and I will start with some stories I heard from my mother. When Saba was 2 years old, he traveled with his parents to Poland to visit their extended family. His father, Yaakov, returned to Israel after 6 months, and Savta Pleva, his mother, stayed with Saba Refael for almost a year. They managed to escape from Poland at the very last moment, just in the nick of time, the same week that the Nazis invaded Poland in September 1939. They returned to Israel on a cargo ship, and Savta Pleva also brought with her another girl from Poland and reunited her with her family in Haifa. A few years later, when Saba was a child living in Bnei Brak, the Chazon Ish, a great Haredi posek at the time, gave him a bechina, testing his skills. And the Chazon Ish was so impressed with Saba's smarts, he said that he needs to study in yeshiva and become a great rabbi. But instead of choosing a career in the rabbinate, Saba chose to take the path of Torah v'avodah, Torah and work, which he carried on devotedly for all of his life. He loved to learn Torah and Gemara and give Dvar Torahs, but he was also a working man and did this very diligently in many fields. He was a role model for how to combine Torah study and living a Jewish life while succeeding in public life. Saba Refael lived all his life in Bnei Brak. When he was a child, there was one movie theater in Bnei Brak, which it's now already closed. When Saba was about 14 or 15 years old, he worked there. In those days, the subtitles were not in the body of the film. Rather, they had to be rolled manually, and Saba was responsible for rolling it. Sometimes he would miss the cue, and the audience would shout out at him, "Translation, translation." In addition to making money from the job, he also got the added benefit of watching free movies. Although at the time, his family lived in a small, cramped apartment, they knew how to laugh and enjoy life. When my sister and I were born, we were put in the NICU. The doctors called my sister the star of the NICU. However, I was not. I was small, weak, and pale, and my parents were very worried about me. Saba Refael asked to visit me in the NICU. He came to see me, and after the visit, he said, "He's an active child, he moves a lot in the incubator, and everything will be fine." And indeed, he was right. Ever since Avigail and I were born, Saba Refael loved us very much, and we are very close to him, even if we did not get to see each other a lot because we live in the United States. In the summer of 2019, I visited Israel for 6 weeks and met a lot with Saba Refael. We studied Gemara together, chatted, and went to the synagogue of Hasidei Gul in Bnei Brak. Even though our conversations were not super long and we didn't study complex tractates, I still felt a strong bond with him. Seeing the wide smile on his face after our conversations was very moving and meaningful to me. Even though we lived an ocean apart, he was still with me. Saba Refael loved going on family trips. On any trip, whether in Israel or abroad, the whole family had to get up very early in the morning so they could get to see all the attractions in the area. Maybe because of that, as my sister Abigail says, when our family goes on trips, there's no way we're leaving the house before 11 in the morning. This anecdote shows that Saba was very dedicated and hardworking, even on vacations. I'd like to finish with a Dvar Torah. This past week, we read my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, Vayelech. In the first verse, it says, Vayelech Moshe vaydaber et kol hadvarim ha'ele el kol Yisrael. Moses went and spoke these things to Israel. The first question that comes to mind is, where did Moshe go? In other places in Tanakh, when it says Vayelech, the Torah says where people are going. For example, in Parashat Vayetze, it says, Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. And Yaakov left from Beersheba and he went to Haran. And in the continuation of Parashat Vayelech, it even says, Vayelech Moshe v'Yoshua v'yitetzu be'ol moed. Moses and Joshua went and settled at the tent of meeting. So why does it not say where Moses went in the first verse? To answer this question, let's look at the second verse. Vayomer alehem en mea ve'esrim shana anochi hayom lo uchal od latzet ve'lavo v'Adonai amar elai lo tavor et ha'Yarden hazeh. Moses said to them, I am now 120 years old. I can no longer be active. Moreover, the Lord has said to me, you shall not go across the Jordan. So what is the meaning of lo uchal od latzet ve'lavo? I can no longer go out and come. According to Rashi, it is this. Moshe ben 120 shana b'moto lo katayno v'lo nas lecho. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were undimmed and his vigor unabated. And then he continues to say that Hashem lo natan li likanes le'eretz Yisrael. God did not let me go into the land of Israel. So according to Rashi, it's that Moshe was not allowed to go. That's what lo uchal od latzet ve'lavo. The Ibn Ezra brings a separate opinion. He says, Lo uchal latzet ve'lavo is ein biyachol ilechem. I don't have the ability to fight. So according to Ibn Ezra, the meaning of lo uchal od latzet ve'lavo is something that we all know. When a person ages and becomes older, it is harder to move around physically. So how can we connect this to answer a question of Vayelech Moshe? With this in mind, of lo uchal od latzet ve'lavo, Vayelech doesn't really mean to go from point A to point B. Rather, it means to create. Even though that Moses was weaker when he was older, he continued to be a leader, to be mentally active, and to be productive in any way that he could. In this parsha, he wrote a Sefer Torah, he spoke to Yeshua, and he gave the Torah to Levi. Just like Moshe, also Saba Refael continued to work until his final days. He continued to create, to write, to teach Torah, and even just recently, he came out with a book of drashot on Sefer Bereshit called Drashot Refael, which you saw earlier. We love you, Saba, and we're going to miss you.
Shkoyach.